When you create colors in processing, you have two choices for how to describe them. One is RGB, or red, green, blue, which I talked about in the RGB video. The other is HSB. The HSB system stands for hue, saturation, and brightness. Unlike RGB, the HSB system was designed to make it easy for humans to navigate and find the colors they want. As we saw in the RGB video, we often think of the red, green, blue space as a cube, and you can find any color you want inside this cube, but sometimes it can be a challenge to find just the right color you're looking for. The HSB system was designed to get around this problem. This is the Hsb Color Solid. It's a three-dimensional cone. The cone has a black tip. The colors get brighter as they work their way up. And at the very top, we have white in the middle and colors that get more saturated as we work our way towards the outside. Now you'll notice that I've drawn this cone using lots of little segments. I can even outline the segments so that you can see them more clearly. But that was just for convenience and to be able to draw it nice and fast and be able to tumble it for you. I'll turn those off. When you use your sliders to pick a color, of course, everything will be very, very smooth. Now when I say you use your sliders to pick a color, the idea is that this cone is filled with colors, and we'll slice it up in a minute and you'll see all the colors that are inside. So to specify a color to processing, you identify a point somewhere in this cone. And the way you identify the point is you give it three numbers, values for hue, saturation, and brightness, which are the values that we are about to discuss. So the sliders control those three numbers, and as you move the sliders, you're actually moving around a little point conceptually inside this cone. And to pick a specific color, you set your numbers to locate that specific point. And when you're messing around trying to find a color that feels good to you, what you're effectively doing by moving the sliders is moving the point within this cone. So let's look at the three attributes, hue, saturation, and brightness. The first attribute I want to talk about is brightness. You'll notice that in the middle of the top face, it's white, and at the point of the bottom of the cone, it's black. So let's take a look at the core of the cone, just those colors running from the top of the middle face to the point at the bottom. So the way I'll isolate those is first I'll carve a hole in the middle of the cone, and I'll just cut away all the colors except for the outermost edge, like an ice cream cone. So all those colors are still there. They're all inside. I'm just not drawing those little boxes. And now I'll close up that cone until I'm just looking at the core. So now this is the core of the cone. And you can see it's gray. It's the gray scale. Black is at the base, white is at the top, and we have grays all up and down the middle. This is the brightness axis. So when you sit there and you play with your sliders and you change brightness, what you're doing is you're moving your color up and down the cone from the point to the tip. And if I bring the cone back, you can see that at the point, the colors are all dark, and at the tip, they are significantly brighter. And that's why we call that the brightness axis. The second attribute I want to talk about is saturation. To see that, we're going to carve our way down to the central core again. So there's our center. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to step out one step at a time. So it sure looks pretty gray to me. But as we move our way out to the outside of the cone, you'll notice now we can really see some colors. These are super light pastels. And so we say they're very desaturated. They're nearly white, but there's a little bit of color to them. Well, as we look at the colors that are further and further away from the central core, they are more and more vivid. We say they're more and more saturated. And so these colors are becoming more saturated as I work my way out. So if you pick a point that's near the outside of the cone, you are picking a more saturated color than one that's near the middle. And in fact, if you are familiar with Photoshop, there's a command called desaturate. That takes your color picture and turns it into black and white. In other words, it takes every point that's inside this cone and simply moves it into that vertical core, which is just the grays. So saturation is the degree to which you have moved from the central gray core to the colors on the outside. As we move closer to the central core, the colors desaturate more and more, losing their vividness until they're just the grays. And if we saturate them, they become more and more colorful. Finally, we have hue. And hue is just the color going around the outside. It sure looks like a color wheel, but in the HSB model, we don't think about color as a combination of primaries. We really don't have any primaries. Color is just the direction around the wheel. So with the cone sitting the way it is right now, we might say 12 o'clock is somewhere between yellow and green, and 6 o'clock is kind of a blue-purple. And now we can describe any hue that we want by giving it an angle on the clock. Like 8:30 looks like kind of a bright magenta to me. So what do the colors of the cone look like if we shave downwards? Well, let's go ahead and try that. I'm going to take away the top layers and work our way down. And you can see what's happening to the colors. The saturation is still increasing as we go out from the central core, but the brightness is taking its cue from the amount of gray. So when we're down here near the tip of the cone, all the colors are looking pretty black. And as we work our way back up, we get more and more brightness in that whole layer. The central core color becomes whiter, and all the colors become brighter. We can also cut the hue wheel open. So let's do that and look inside. So all I've done is I've taken a bite out of the wheel. And we can see that at the base of the cone, as always, it's black. And that central core is running from the blacks to the whites. And so now that's running kind of horizontally, but that's our brightness axis. And saturation is running from that central core out to the outside. And so we can see right along the central axis, we have the grays. If we move out into the reds, we get increasingly saturated reds. If we move out towards the yellows, we get increasingly saturated yellows. And we can march this little slice around and look at different parts of the cone. Here we are looking at increasingly saturated blues as we move away from the central axis. So that's the Hsb color cone. It's a really nice system for picking colors, which is why it's been around, and it's also why it's used in so many color pickers. It's really convenient to be able to pick your hue and then your saturation, and then you adjust it. You adjust the amount of brightness, and you can zero in on the color you're looking for very quickly. A lot of people find it's a lot easier to use this than RGB. I certainly feel that way. And if you have this cone model somewhere in the back of your head, it will make picking colors even that much easier.